The blood-red sun hung low over the dusty horizon as Gabriella Winters pressed her back against the rough timber of Colton's trading post, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was 1875 in the unforgiving Arizona territory, and she was running out of options faster than she was running out of breath. 3 days without food had left her weak, her once fine dress now torn and soiled from her desperate journey across the harsh landscape. The sound of approaching footsteps sent a jolt of fear through her body, and she pressed herself deeper into the shadows, praying to become invisible. "I know you're back there, madam," a deep voice called out, neither threatening nor particularly friendly. "Just matter of fact. Been watching you hide there since noon." Gabriella froze, her fingers gripping the wooden planks behind her. She'd thought herself clever, waiting until the trading post had emptied of its usual customers before sneaking around back. Obviously, she'd been wrong. The footsteps came closer, boots crunching on the hard-packed earth. A tall figure cast a long shadow that stretched toward her hiding place. "Not looking to cause you any trouble," the voice continued. "Just wondering if you might want some food or a friend. Seems to me you could use both." She peered around the corner of the building, her caution warring with her desperate hunger. The man standing there wore the dust of the trail on his clothes, a weathered hat pulled low over his eyes. His stance was relaxed, non-threatening, one hand holding the reins of a chestnut mare, the other resting casually on his belt. Not near his gun, she noted with relief. "I don't need charity," she managed to say, though her empty stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. The cowboy tilted his head slightly, and she caught a glimpse of blue eyes beneath the brim of his hat. "Never said anything about charity, madam. Just offering a meal and maybe some conversation to a fellow traveler. Name's Zachary Reid." Gabriella hesitated, weighing her limited options. She could continue hiding, growing weaker by the hour, or she could take a chance on this stranger. Neither choice seemed particularly wise, but only one offered the possibility of food. "Gabriella," she finally said, stepping cautiously into view. "Gabriella Winters." A hint of a smile touched Zachary's lips as he nodded in acknowledgement. "Well, Miss Winters, there's a small campfire with beans and coffee just beyond that ridge. Nothing fancy, but it's hot and there's plenty." She took a tentative step forward, still wary. "Why would you help a stranger?" "Been on my own long enough to know that sometimes a kind word and a hot meal can make all the difference." He shrugged, then added, "Besides, this territory's hard enough without going hungry. No strings attached." Something in his straightforward manner reassured her. Perhaps it was foolish, but she found herself believing him. Thank you. I would appreciate some food." As they walked toward his camp, Gabriella maintained a careful distance between them. The mare followed behind, occasionally nickering softly. "That's Penny," Zachary said, noticing Gabriella's glance at the horse. "Been with me 5 years now. Better company than most people I meet." The camp was simple but orderly, a small fire, a bedroll, and saddlebags propped against a rock. True to his word, a pot of beans simmered over the flames, and a battered coffee pot sat nearby. The aroma made Gabriella's mouth water embarrassingly. "Please sit," he offered, gesturing to a flat rock near the fire. He busied himself with tin plates and cups, giving her space to settle herself. As he handed her a plate of beans and a thick slice of bread, their fingers brushed momentarily. She noticed calluses on his hands, working hands, not those of a bandit or a gunslinger. At least, she hoped not. "What brings you to this part of the territory?" he asked, settling across from her with his own plate. Gabriella took a bite of food, nearly moaning at the simple pleasure of it filling her empty stomach. She chewed slowly, buying time to decide how much to reveal. "I'm traveling," she finally said. Zachary nodded, accepting her vague answer, without pressing. "Traveling's a hard business out here for anyone, especially a woman alone." I didn't plan to be alone, she admitted, surprising herself with the honesty. Circumstances changed. He sipped his coffee, his blue eyes studying her over the rim of his cup. Circumstances have a way of doing that out here. They ate in silence for a while, the crackling fire and distant coyote calls the only sounds breaking the quiet of the gathering dusk. Gabriella found herself relaxing slightly, the warm food and lack of questions easing her constant vigilance. "Where are you headed?" she finally asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "North, to Silver Creek. Got some business with the ranchers there." He set his empty plate aside. "And you? Got anywhere specific you're running to? Or from?" Her head snapped up, eyes widening at his perception. "I never said I was running." A ghost of a smile crossed his face.
"Don't need to say it.
"It's written all over you, the way you hide, the way you watch the trail behind us." "I'm not asking for your story, Miss Winters. Just wondering if you have a destination in mind." Gabriella looked down at her nearly empty plate, considering her answer carefully. "I was headed to Tucson. My aunt lives there, or at least she did 10 years ago." "That's still a good 4 days' ride from here," Zachary observed. "Longer on foot." "I know." She bit her lip, the weight of her situation settling heavily on her shoulders once more. He didn't immediately respond, just poured more coffee for them both. After a long moment, he spoke again. "I'm headed within a day's ride of Tucson after my business in Silver Creek. If you'd like, you could ride with me that far." Gabriella stiffened. "I told you, I don't need charity. And I meant what I said earlier, it's not charity I'm offering." His voice remained even, patient. "The territory's dangerous. I could use an extra pair of eyes watching the trail. You'd be doing me a favor." She knew it was a polite fiction, but something about the way he framed it allowed her to preserve her pride. Still, she hesitated. "You don't have to decide now," he added. "Camp with me tonight, I'll keep to my side of the fire. In the morning, if you want to go your own way, I won't stop you." The proposition seemed reasonable, and the alternative, continuing alone, hungry, and exhausted, was becoming less feasible by the hour. Thank you. I accept your offer of company for the night. We can discuss tomorrow, when it comes." Zachary nodded, satisfied with her answer. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a worn blanket, offering it to her. "It gets cold at night. You can use this." The gesture, small as it was, nearly brought tears to her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had shown her kindness without expecting something in return. "Thank you," she murmured, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. As the stars emerged in the vast desert sky, Gabriella found herself studying her unexpected companion. In the firelight, she could see that Zachary Reid was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30 or so. His face was tanned and weathered from the sun, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of squinting into the distance. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense, but there was something compelling about his features, a steadiness, reliability that she found oddly comforting. True to his word, he remained on his side of the fire, eventually settling onto his bedroll with his hat over his face. "Sleep well, Miss Winters," he said. "We're pretty isolated here, but I'm a light sleeper. Nothing to worry about." She nodded, though he couldn't see it, and curled up on her side of the fire, the borrowed blanket pulled tight around her. Despite her wariness, exhaustion soon claimed her, and she fell into the deepest sleep she'd had in days. Morning arrived with the harsh brilliance of the desert sun. Gabriella woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. The smell of coffee brought her fully awake, and she sat up to find Zachary already moving about the camp, preparing a simple breakfast. "Morning," he greeted her, his voice gruff with sleep. "Thought you might want to get an early start, whichever way you're heading." She pushed her tangled hair from her face, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. "Yes, thank you." He handed her a cup of coffee and a plate with hardtack and dried beef. Not a feast, but more than she'd had in days. Figured you could use the strength, he said simply. As they ate, Gabriella made her decision. I'll ride with you to Silver Creek, she said. And then perhaps to Tucson if your offer still stands. Zachary nodded, satisfaction briefly crossing his features before his expression returned to its usual calm. Good. We can make decent time if we leave within the hour. The reality of riding with him suddenly struck her. I don't. That is, I haven't ridden in some time. Penny's gentle enough for both of us, he assured her. We'll take it slow. True to his word, Penny proved to be a steady mount. Gabriella sat behind Zachary, her hands lightly holding his waist for balance. The physical contact made her uncomfortable at first, but as the day wore on and the desert landscape rolled by, she gradually relaxed. They stopped at midday in a small patch of shade offered by a cluster of rocks. As they shared a canteen of water, Zachary finally asked the question she'd been dreading. Those men back at the trading post yesterday, they weren't just passing through, were they? Gabriella froze. What men? The three who rode in just before sundown. You ducked behind the building when they appeared. Seemed like more than just caution to me. She looked away, her fingers nervously pleating the fabric of her skirt. There. Looking for me. Zachary didn't seem surprised. Figured as much. Bounty hunters. The denial came quickly. Nothing like that. I haven't done anything wrong. She paused, then added more quietly, they work for the man I was supposed to marry. His eyebrows rose slightly. Supposed to? I ran, she admitted. The night before the wedding. He's not a good man, Mr. Reid. Zachary, he corrected gently. And I figured it was something like that. Man doesn't send 3 riders after a woman unless he's mighty determined. Fear fluttered in her chest. Will you? Are you going to turn me in? There might be a reward. His blue eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. I'm not in the business of returning people to situations they've risked everything to escape, Miss Winters. Your reasons are your own. Relief washed over her. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Those men looked like they know their business. We'll need to be careful. The reminder of the danger sobered her quickly. I don't want to bring trouble to you. Zachary gave a short laugh, the first she'd heard from him. Trouble and I are old acquaintances, Miss Winters. One more helping won't make much difference. As they continued their journey, the terrain gradually changed, becoming more rugged and offering more vegetation than the flat desert they'd left behind. Gabriella found herself telling Zachary bits and pieces of her story, how her father's death had left her in the care of a stepmother who had arranged her marriage to Harold Blackwood, a wealthy rancher 3 times her age with a reputation for cruelty. He collects things, she explained as they made camp that evening. Beautiful things that he can own and control. I was to be his latest acquisition. Zachary listened without judgment, occasionally asking a question but mostly allowing her to speak at her own pace. In turn, he shared fragments of his own past growing up on a small farm in Missouri, losing his parents to illness, making his way west to seek his fortune, and finding instead a life of drifting from job to job. Not much to show for 32 years, he admitted, stoking the fire. But I answer to no one, and there's something to be said for that. Days passed in this manner, their journey slowed by the need to avoid main trails and settlements where Blackwood's men might be asking questions. Gabriella found herself growing comfortable in Zachary's company, his quiet competence and undemanding presence a balm to her frayed nerves. It was on the 4th day, as they approached a narrow canyon that would lead them toward Silver Creek, that their luck ran out. They had just entered the shadow of the high rock walls when the sound of hoofbeats echoed behind them. Riders coming, Zachary said tersely, immediately guiding Penny off the trail and into a cluster of boulders. Hust! Gabriella's heart raced as they dismounted, and Zachary quickly tied Penny to a scrubby tree. How many? She whispered. Can't tell yet. Stay low. He drew his revolver, checking it with practiced efficiency. The hoofbeats grew louder, dust rising from the trail. Through a gap in the rocks, Gabriella caught a glimpse of 3 riders, the same men she'd seen at the trading post. Her blood ran cold. "It's them," she whispered unnecessarily. Zachary nodded, his expression grim. "They're tracking us. Must have picked up our trail back a ways." The riders slowed as they entered the canyon, clearly searching for signs of passage. One of them, a burly man with a bushy beard, pointed to the ground where Penny's hooves had left marks in the dust. "They're close," the man called to his companions. "Can't be more than half an hour ahead." Another rider, tall and thin with a pockmarked face, spat into the dust. "Blackwood's going to skin us alive if we don't bring her back by the end of the week." "He can try," the third man laughed, a sound that sent shivers down Gabriella's spine. "Let's move. They're on foot now, won't get far in this heat." The 3 spurred their horses forward, continuing down the canyon. Zachary waited until the sound of hooves had faded before speaking. "They know we're on foot. That gives us an advantage they don't expect." He holstered his gun and turned to Gabriella. "There's a fork about a mile ahead. They'll follow the main trail, expecting us to do the same. But I know a game trail that branches off. It's rough going, but it'll lead us out of the canyon and up to the ridge. From there, we can circle back and continue north without them being any wiser." Gabriella nodded, trusting his knowledge of the territory. "Will Penny be able to manage the trail?" "She's sure-footed, but we'll lead her. It's too narrow to ride in places." He gave her a steady look. "It'll be hard going. Are you up for it?" She straightened her shoulders, determination replacing fear.
Yes.
"I didn't come this far to be dragged back now." Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. "Let's move, then. We've got a long climb ahead." The game trail proved to be even more challenging than Zachary had suggested, a narrow, winding path that sometimes seemed to disappear entirely among the rocks. They led Penny carefully, often having to stop and search for the next section of trail. The sun beat down mercilessly, and by midday, Gabriella's dress was soaked with sweat, her feet blistered inside her impractical shoes. Still, she pressed on without complaint, refusing to be the weak link. Zachary noticed her determination, occasionally offering a hand over particularly difficult sections, but never suggesting she couldn't manage. They reached the ridge as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. From their elevated position, they could see for miles in every direction, including back down into the canyon, where Blackwood's men were still following the main trail, now far ahead of their actual position. "We did it," Gabriella breathed, a smile breaking across her face despite her exhaustion. Zachary nodded, a rare smile touching his own lips. "You did well. Better than many men I've ridden with." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. "Thank you for knowing the way." "Let's rest here for a bit before continuing," he suggested, helping her to a flat rock in the shade of a gnarled juniper. "We should reach Silver Creek by tomorrow afternoon if we make good time." As they shared their dwindling supplies, Gabriella found herself studying Zachary's profile against the vast landscape. In just a few days, this man had become someone she trusted with her life, a remarkable transformation from the fearful, suspicious woman who had hidden behind the trading post. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. The truth this time, not just about being a good Samaritan. Zachary was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the distant horizon. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "My sister. She was married off to a man like your Blackwood when she was 18. Rich, powerful, cruel. By the time I found her 2 years later, there wasn't much left of the girl I grew up with." He paused, his jaw tightening. "She died that winter. Pneumonia, they said, but I always wondered if she just lost the will to fight." Gabriella's heart ached for the pain she heard in his voice. "I'm sorry. I promised myself I'd never stand by again, if I could help." He turned to look at her directly. When I saw you hiding behind that trading post, something in your eyes reminded me of her. I couldn't just ride away. The honesty of his answer touched something deep within her. Impulsively, she reached out and placed her hand over his. Thank you for not riding away. His fingers curled around hers briefly before he cleared his throat and stood. We should move on. I want to put more distance between us and those riders before nightfall. They continued their journey, making camp that night in a small hollow protected by high rocks. As they sat by the fire, the desert chill settling around them, Gabriella found herself speaking more freely than she had in years, telling Zachary about her childhood in St. Louis, her dreams of becoming a teacher, the gradual erosion of her options after her father's death. I had a trunk packed for months, she admitted. Every night, I would think about leaving, but I never had the courage. Then, the night before the wedding, I overheard Blackwood talking to his ranch foreman. He said she faltered, the memory still raw. He said breaking me would be the most enjoyable part of the marriage. That wild fillies always fought the bit at first, but they all submitted eventually. Zachary's expression darkened. No man has the right to break another human being's spirit. That night, I finally found my courage, she continued. I took what little money I had, my mother's locket, and the clothes on my back. I've been running ever since. How long ago was that? 3 weeks now. I worked in a small restaurant for a while in Carson City, but word came that Blackwood's men were asking questions. I left that night. She sighed. I thought if I could reach my aunt in Tucson, I might find safe haven. And you will, Zachary assured her. Blackwood's influence doesn't extend that far south. Once we're past Silver Creek, the worst danger should be behind us. His confidence bolstered her own. For the first time since her escape, Gabriella allowed herself to believe she might actually succeed. Morning brought a change in the weather, dark clouds gathering on the horizon, promising rare desert rain. They broke camp quickly, hoping to make as much progress as possible before the storm hit. By midday, the sky had darkened ominously, and thunder rumbled in the distance. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and stirring dust into small whirlwinds that danced across their path. There's a lined shack about an hour ahead, Zachary said, eyeing the approaching storm with concern. Used by cowboys during roundup. Should be empty this time of year. They pushed on, and the first heavy drops began to fall just as a small wooden structure came into view, nestled against a hillside. The rain quickly intensified, and they were soaked by the time they reached the shelter of the shack's porch. Zachary checked the interior first, revolver drawn, before signaling Gabriella to enter. The shack was basic, but found a single room with a small iron stove, a rough table with 2 chairs, and a narrow cot against one wall. Dusty but clean, it offered welcome refuge from the storm now raging outside. It's not the Palmer house, Zachary commented dryly as he set about starting a fire in the stove, but it'll keep us dry. Gabriella wrung water from her skirt, suddenly acutely aware of her bedraggled appearance. It's perfect, she assured him, meaning it. After weeks of uncertainty and days on the trail, even this humble shelter felt luxurious. Once the fire was lit, Zachary went back out to tend a penny, leading the mare to a small lean-to attached to the back of the shack. Gabriella took the opportunity to assess their supplies and was dismayed to find that their food had dwindled to a handful of jerky and half a pouch of coffee. When Zachary returned, dripping wet, she showed him their meager stores. We'll need to find more supplies before continuing to Tucson. Silver Creek's not far. We can stock up there. He removed his sodden coat and hung it near the stove. Storm looks like it's settling in for the night. We might as well make ourselves comfortable. The realization that they would be spending the night together in this small, intimate space sent a flush of warmth to Gabriella's cheeks. She'd grown comfortable with Zachary's presence on the trail, but this felt different, more private, more personal. If Zachary noticed her discomfort, he gave no sign, busying himself with arranging their few belongings and setting coffee to boil on the stove. Outside, the rain pounded on the roof, punctuated by occasional crashes of thunder. "Your dress is soaked through," he observed matter-of-factly. "You'll catch your death if you don't dry out." He rummaged in his saddlebag and produced a clean, if well-worn, flannel shirt and a pair of trousers. "These might swim on you, but they're dry. I'll step outside while you change." Before she could protest that he'd get soaked again, he was out the door, closing it firmly behind him. Gabriella stood holding the clothes, touched by his consideration. After a moment's hesitation, she quickly changed out of her wet dress, grateful for the warmth of the dry clothing despite their oversized fit. "You can come back in," she called when she was decent. Zachary re-entered, water streaming from his hat. He stopped short at the sight of her in his clothes, an unreadable expression crossing his face before he quickly looked away. "Better?" he asked, his voice slightly gruff.
"Much.
"Thank you." She'd rolled up the sleeves and trouser legs and used a piece of rope from his supplies as a makeshift belt. The outfit was far from fashionable, but it was the most comfortable she'd been in weeks. He nodded, hanging his hat by the door. Coffee should be ready soon. They settled into an unexpectedly domestic routine, sharing the small space, with a consideration for each other's privacy that came naturally after their days on the trail together. Zachary proved to be resourceful, finding a forgotten tin of beans in one of the shack's cupboards and preparing a simple but filling meal. As night fell and the storm continued its assault, they sat at the small table, the lantern casting warm light between them. Gabriella found herself studying Zachary's hands as he cleaned his revolver, strong, capable hands that had helped her over rough terrain, prepared meals, and kept her safe. "Tell me about Silver Creek," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "What business do you have there?" His fingers paused momentarily in their work. "I've been hired to break horses for the Circle M Ranch. Their regular wrangler broke his leg, and they need someone to finish training their new stock before winter." "You're a horse breaker?" The profession suited him. She thought patient, steady, firm, but kind. "Among other things. I've cowboyed, scouted, even tried my hand at mining for a spell." He reassembled the revolver with practiced ease. "Never stayed in one place long enough to put down roots." "No family waiting somewhere?" The question slipped out before she could consider its propriety. Zachary's expression remained neutral. "None but Penny." "You?" "Just my aunt in Tucson, if she's still there." Gabriella traced patterns in the wooden tabletop with her fingertip. "I always thought I'd have a family of my own by now, children, a home. Life had other plans, I suppose." "Life has a way of surprising us," he agreed. "For better or worse." Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted in the air between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. Two lonely souls adrift in the vast wilderness of the West, momentarily anchored in this small shelter while the storm raged outside. The moment stretched, charged with unspoken possibilities, until a particularly loud crack of thunder broke the spell. Gabriella jumped slightly, and Zachary cleared his throat, rising to check the stove. "You should take the cot," he said, his back to her. "I'll make do on the floor." She started to protest, but he cut her off with a gentle firmness. "I've slept on worse, believe me."
"Get some rest."
"We'll head out at first light if the storm breaks." Eventually, she yielded, settling onto the narrow cot while Zachary arranged his bedroll on the floor nearby. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her for some time, her mind filled with confusing new feelings and the constant awareness of Zachary's presence just a few feet away. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were a jumble of pursuit and escape, with Zachary always just ahead, leading her to safety. Morning arrived with clearing skies and a fresh, rain-washed world. They set out early, the muddy trail slowing their progress but not their spirits. Something had changed between them during the night in the line shack, a tentative connection forming, though neither acknowledged it openly. By mid-afternoon, they crested a rise and saw Silver Creek spread out below them, a small but thriving settlement nestled in a valley, with scattered ranches visible in the distance. "There it is," Zachary said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "We made it." Gabriella felt a surprising pang of regret. Their journey together was coming to an end, at least this leg of it. "How long will your business here take?" "A few weeks, maybe a month." He glanced at her. "The offer still stands to escort you to Tucson afterward, if you're willing to wait." The thought of remaining in one place for weeks, potentially exposed to discovery, made her nervous. But the alternative, continuing alone, seemed suddenly unappealing. "I could find work in town," she mused. "Save some money for when I reach Tucson." Zachary nodded thoughtfully. "The hotel might be hiring. Owner's wife mentioned needing help last time I passed through." As they rode into town, Gabriella was acutely aware of the curious glances cast their way. A woman in a bedraggled dress, riding double with a dusty cowboy, was bound to attract attention. She kept her head down, years of social conditioning making her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Zachary seemed unperturbed by the attention, guiding Penny directly to a modest but well-maintained hotel on the town's main street. "Wait here," he said, helping her dismount. "Let me inquire about that position." He returned shortly with a middle-aged woman in tow, plump, red-cheeked, with kind eyes that assessed Gabriella with open curiosity. "This is Mrs. Hollister," Zachary introduced. "She owns the hotel with her husband." "Mrs. Hollister, this is Miss Gabriella Winters." "Zachary tells me you're looking for work while he's breaking horses for the Circle M," Mrs. Hollister said, her gaze taking in Gabriella's disheveled appearance without judgment. "Says you're handy and honest, which is more than I can say for the last girl who worked for me." Gabriella shot Zachary a grateful look for the recommendation. "I'm a hard worker, madam. I can clean, sew, and I learn quickly." Mrs. Hollister nodded, apparently satisfied. "Room and board plus $2 a week. Work starts at dawn, ends when the work's done. Sundays off unless we're especially busy." It was a fair offer, better than Gabriella had expected. "Thank you, Mrs. Hollister. I accept." "Good. Let's get you settled and find you some proper clothes." She turned to Zachary. "Mr. Reid, I expect you'll be staying with us as well? If you have a room available. For you, always." Mrs. Hollister smiled with obvious fondness. "Though I expect you'll be spending most nights out at the Circle M once you start work." As they followed Mrs. Hollister into the hotel, Zachary leaned close to murmur in Gabriella's ear. "She's good people. You'll be safe here." The hotel was modest but clean, with a small dining room that served simple meals to travelers and locals alike. Mrs. Hollister showed Gabriella to a tiny room off the kitchen, clearly intended for staff, while Zachary was given a proper guest room upstairs. "Get cleaned up," Mrs. Hollister instructed, providing Gabriella with a plain but clean dress that had belonged to her daughter. "Then come help me with the evening meal. Best way to learn is by doing." Left alone, Gabriella took stock of her new situation. The room was small but private, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a hook for her clothes. After weeks of uncertainty and danger, the simple security of it brought tears to her eyes. By the time she emerged, washed and changed into the borrowed dress, the kitchen was abuzz with activity. Mrs. Hollister set her to work immediately, and Gabriella welcomed the distraction of practical tasks. She caught only glimpses of Zachary that evening, once in the dining room, where he shared a table with a weather-beaten man she assumed was from the Circle M ranch, and later in the hallway as she carried linens upstairs. "Settling in?" he asked, pausing on his way to his room. "Yes, thank you. Mrs. Hollister is kind." She hesitated, suddenly shy in this new context where they were no longer fellow travelers, but a hotel employee and a guest. "When do you leave for the ranch?" "Tomorrow morning. I'll be back in town now, and then for supplies." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Take care, Gabriella." "You too, Zachary." He nodded and continued down the hall, leaving her with an odd sense of loss despite knowing he would return. Days passed, settling into a routine of hard work that Gabriella found surprisingly satisfying. Mrs. Hollister proved to be a fair employer and a fountain of local knowledge, keeping Gabriella informed of all the comings and goings in Silver Creek. "That new doctor's sweet on the Widow Perkins," she would say while kneading bread dough, or "the Millers are expecting their 6th child. Lord help them." Gabriella absorbed it all, gradually feeling less like an outsider and more like a part of the community. She was careful, though, never to reveal too much about her own past, sticking to the story she and Zachary had agreed upon that she was a distant cousin of his, traveling to Tucson to live with family after being widowed. The lie sat uncomfortably with her, but she understood its necessity. Harold Blackwood's reach was long, and while his men had seemingly moved on from the area, caution was still warranted. Zachary returned to town every week or so, usually staying a night at the hotel before heading back to the ranch. Each time, they managed to find a few moments to speak privately, brief conversations in the hotel kitchen or on the back porch, where he would update her on his progress with the horses, and she would share small anecdotes from her work at the hotel. She found herself looking forward to these encounters with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. Zachary was unfailingly respectful, never presuming upon their growing friendship, but she couldn't help noticing the way his eyes followed her movements or how his normally serious expression softened when she spoke. 3 weeks into her stay at Silver Creek, Gabriella was serving breakfast in the dining room when the hotel door opened, admitting 3 trail dusty men whose appearance made her blood run cold. Blackwood's men had found Silver Creek. She ducked into the kitchen, heart pounding, and peered through the serving hatch. The men were speaking to Mr. Hollister at the front desk, their manner casual, but their eyes watchful. "Just passing through," the bearded one was saying. "Looking for a woman, young, pretty, dark hair. Might be traveling under the name Winters." Mr. Hollister shook his head. "Haven't seen anyone of that description lately. Most of our guests are drummers and cattle buyers this time of year." The man slid a folded paper across the desk, a wanted poster. Gabriella realized with horror. $10 for anyone with information. She's wanted for theft. Theft, is it? Mr. Hollister studied the paper with mild interest. "Well, I'll certainly keep an eye out. Will you gentlemen be staying with us?" "Just one night. We've got ground to cover." Mrs. Hollister appeared beside Gabriella, her expression concerned. "Those men are looking for you," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Gabriella nodded, unable to speak through her fear. "Come with me." Mrs. Hollister led her through the kitchen and up a narrow back staircase to the family's private quarters. "Stay here until I come for you. Don't make a sound." Alone in the Hollister sitting room, Gabriella paced anxiously. Had her deception been discovered? Would the Hollisters turn her in for the reward? Should she try to escape now, before the men could find her? An hour passed before Mrs. Hollister returned, her husband with her. They regarded Gabriella with matching expressions of concern. "Those men claim you stole jewelry and money from your employer," Mr. Hollister said, without preamble. "Said you were a housemaid who absconded with valuables." Gabriella shook her head vehemently. "It's not true. I never stole anything in my life." "We didn't think so," Mrs. Hollister said, patting her hand. "Zachary Reid vouched for you, and that's good enough for us. Besides, those men have the look of trouble about them." Relief washed over Gabriella. "Thank you for not turning me in." "You're not the first person to need a fresh start," Mr. Hollister said kindly. "But you should know they've posted that notice all over town. It won't be safe for you to be seen until they've moved on." The reality of her situation sank in. Silver Creek was no longer a haven. "I should leave," she said, though the thought filled her with dread. "I'm putting you in danger by staying." The Hollisters exchanged a look. "We've sent word to Zachary at the Circle M," Mrs. Hollister said. "Until he arrives, you'll stay hidden in our quarters. After that—" She left the sentence unfinished. For 2 days, Gabriella remained sequestered in the Hollisters' rooms, emerging only after dark to help with kitchen duties when the dining room was closed. She watched through upstairs windows as Blackwood's men questioned townspeople, showing the wanted poster and offering their reward. On the evening of the second day, as she stood at the window watching the sunset paint the distant mountains, a familiar figure rode into town Zachary, pushing Penny harder than she'd ever seen him do. He dismounted at the hotel's back entrance, disappearing from view. Minutes later, Mrs. Hollister ushered him into the sitting room. He was dusty from the trail, his expression grave as his eyes found Gabriella. "You're all right," he said, relief evident in his voice. She nodded, suddenly fighting tears. "Thanks to the Hollisters. But Zachary, those men, I know. I saw the posters in town." His jaw tightened. Theft charges. Blackwood's trying a new approach. Mrs. Hollister cleared her throat. "I'll leave you two to talk. There's coffee on the stove if you want it." She left, closing the door behind her. Alone with Zachary, Gabriella found the tears she'd been holding back finally spilling over. "I'm sorry," she said, brushing them away angrily. "I've put everyone in danger. You, the Hollisters, stop." Zachary crossed the room in 2 strides, taking her hands in his. "None of this is your fault. Blackwood is the villain here, not you." The warmth of his hands around hers was steadying, his blue eyes intent on her face. "We need to get you out of Silver Creek," he continued. "Those men are planning to stay at least another day, but they've got people watching the trails. Where can I go? Tucson is still days away." "The Circle M." He squeezed her hands gently. "The foreman's wife is my cousin's widow. She'll hide you until I can finish my work there another week at most. Then we'll head for Tucson together." It was a risky plan, but better than remaining in town where Blackwood's men were actively searching. "When do we leave?" "Tonight, after dark. The Hollisters have agreed to create a distraction, a small kitchen fire that will draw attention to the front of the hotel while we slip out the back." His thumbs traced small circles on the backs of her hands, perhaps unconsciously. "It'll be a hard ride in the dark, but we can make it to the ranch before dawn." She nodded, trusting him implicitly. "I'll be ready." He released her hands reluctantly. "I should help with the preparations. Try to rest if you can." But rest was impossible. As darkness fell, Gabriella gathered her few possessions, the clothes Mrs. Hollister had given her, her mother's locket, and the small amount of money she'd earned at the hotel. She changed into the trousers and shirt Zachary had lent her weeks ago, knowing they would be more practical for a night ride than a dress. Shortly before midnight, Mrs. Hollister came to fetch her. "It's time," she whispered, leading Gabriella down the back stairs. "Be careful, my dear. And remember, you always have friends in Silver Creek." The older woman's kindness brought a lump to Gabriella's throat. "Thank you for everything." Zachary was waiting in the hotel's small stable, Penny saddled and ready. From the front of the building came shouts, and the sound of running feet. The distraction was working. "Ready?" he asked, helping her mount. "Ready." They slipped out the back way, keeping to the shadows until they reached the edge of town. Only then did Zachary urge Penny into a trot, taking a trail that led away from the main road toward the distant lights of what Gabriella assumed was the Circle M ranch. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. Gabriella held tight to Zachary's waist as they rode, the familiar rhythm of Penny's gait and the solid warmth of Zachary's back against her chest providing comfort despite their precarious situation. They rode in silence for the most part, Zachary occasionally pointing out landmarks or warning of rough terrain ahead. It was close to dawn when they finally approached the ranch, a collection of buildings nestled in a valley, with corrals visible in the pre-dawn light. A woman emerged from the main house as they rode in, shotgun in hand, until she recognized Zachary. "Reid." What in tarnation are you doing riding in at this hour? Morning, Martha. Sorry for the early arrival. We need your help. Zachary dismounted, then helped Gabriella down. This is Gabriella Winters. She needs a place to lie low for a few days. Martha, a tall, angular woman with iron gray hair, assessed Gabriella with shrewd eyes. The one those men in town are looking for?
Yes.
The charges are false. Martha nodded once, decision made. Get her inside before the hands wake up. I'll tell anyone who asks that she's my niece from Denver. The ranch house was larger than it had appeared from a distance, with a well-appointed sitting room and several bedrooms. Martha led them to a small room at the back of the house. It's not fancy, but it's private, she said, lighting a lamp. No one will bother you here. Exhausted from the night's ride and the emotional strain of the past few days, Gabriella could only murmur her thanks before Martha left them alone. You should rest, Zachary said, hovering in the doorway. I'll be close by if you need anything. She nodded, suddenly shy again in this new setting. Thank you, Zachary. For everything. He held her gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then he nodded and withdrew, closing the door softly behind him. Gabriella sank onto the bed, too tired even to remove her boots. Despite the danger that had brought her here, she felt an unexpected sense of peace. With Zachary nearby, she could finally allow herself to truly rest. Life at the Circle M settled into a new routine. Gabriella remained mostly in the house, helping Martha with cooking and mending while Zachary worked with the horses in the corral. Through the window of her room, she could watch his patience with the half-wild mustangs, the gentle firmness with which he guided them from fear to trust. Martha proved to be a forthright but kind-hearted woman who asked few questions and offered practical support. My Jacob always said Zachary Reid was the best man he ever rode with, she told Gabriella as they prepared dinner one evening. Said he'd trust him with his life. And so would I. He's been very kind to me, Gabriella admitted. Martha's shrewd eyes assessed her. Kind, is it? Seems to me there's more than kindness bringing a man to risk his reputation and possibly his life for a woman. Gabriella flushed, unsure how to respond. Martha chuckled, returning to her biscuit dough. Don't worry, girl. I'm not one to pry. But I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. The observation sent a flutter of something both frightening and exhilarating through Gabriella's chest. She had tried to dismiss her growing feelings for Zachary as gratitude or the natural result of their shared experiences. But in quiet moments, she couldn't deny the truth. She was falling in love with the quiet cowboy who had asked her if she wanted food or a friend behind that trading post. On the 5th day at the Circle M, news came from town. Blackwood's men had finally moved on, convinced that their quarry had fled the area. The information brought relief, but also a strange melancholy. With the immediate danger past, there was no reason to remain at the ranch. That evening, Zachary found her sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. Martha says Blackwood's men have left, she said as he settled onto the step beside her.
Yes.
Headed south, according to the bartender at the Silver Spur. He was quiet for a moment, then added, I've finished the last of the horses. We could leave for Tucson day after tomorrow, if you're still set on going. There was something in his tone, a careful neutrality, that made her turn to study his profile. Is there a reason I shouldn't be? Zachary kept his eyes on the horizon. You seem to be settling in at the hotel before those men showed up. Mrs. Hollister thinks highly of you. Are you suggesting I return to Silver Creek? It's an option.
Or.
He hesitated, then plunged ahead. Martha mentioned that she could use help running the house. The foreman's been after her to hire someone since Jacob died. Gabriella's heart quickened. Are you asking me to stay at the Circle M? Finally, he turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious in the fading light. I'm asking you to consider your options before deciding. Tucson is still there, if that's what you want. But you've made friends here. And you, she asked softly. What will you do when your work here is finished? Something flickered in his expression: vulnerability, hope, uncertainty. I've been offered a permanent position. Ranch hand and horsebreaker. It's good work, steady pay. That doesn't sound like the drifting life you described to me. Maybe I'm tired of drifting. His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. Maybe I found a reason to stay in one place. The air between them seemed charged with possibility. Gabriella's breath caught in her throat as Zachary slowly, tentatively, reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Gabriella, he began, then stopped, apparently struggling for words. I don't have much to offer. Just a cowboy's wage and a reputation for keeping my word. But if you stayed. She covered his hand with her own, keeping it against her cheek. If you stayed, I'd do everything in my power to make sure you never regretted it. The raw honesty in his voice made her heart ache. I know it's sudden. We've only known each other a short while. But I've never felt. Gabriella leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, silencing his doubts with a kiss that expressed everything she couldn't find words for. After a moment of surprise, Zachary responded, his hand sliding to cup the back of her neck, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? He murmured, a smile in his voice. It's a I want to stay and see where this leads, she clarified, though she returned his smile. I'm not ready to make any permanent decisions yet. He nodded, accepting her caution. Fair enough. We have time. As they sat together on the porch, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky, Gabriella felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The journey that had begun in fear behind a trading post had led her here to this moment, this man, this possibility of a future built on mutual respect and growing affection. For the first time since her escape from Blackwood, she allowed herself to truly hope. The weeks that followed were among the happiest of Gabriella's life. She accepted Martha's offer of employment, taking over the household management of the Circle M with an efficiency that impressed even the crusty old foreman. The ranch hands quickly grew accustomed to her presence, treating her with a rough-hewn respect that warmed her heart. And then there was Zachary. True to his word, he never pushed for more than she was ready to give, content to let their relationship develop at its own pace. They took to riding out together on Sundays, Zachary on Penny, Gabriella on a gentle mare named Daisy that Martha insisted she consider her own. During these rides, they explored the beautiful country surrounding the Circle M, sharing stories from their pasts and cautious dreams for the future. With each passing day, Gabriella found herself falling deeper in love with both the land and the man. It was during one such Sunday ride, nearly 2 months after their arrival at the ranch, that Zachary brought Penny to a halt atop a ridge overlooking a small, sheltered valley with a creek running through it. Beautiful, isn't it? He said, dismounting and helping Gabriella down from Daisy. It's perfect. She breathed in the clean, pine-scented air, admiring the way the afternoon sun dappled the meadow below. I've never seen this part of the ranch before. That's because it's not part of the Circle M. Zachary took her hand, leading her to a flat rock where they could sit side by side. This land belongs to me. Gabriella turned to him in surprise. Yours? But you never mentioned. I bought it 5 years ago, when land was cheap after that bad drought. He gestured toward the valley. 160 acres. Not much by some standards, but enough to run a small herd. There's good water, good grass. But you've been drifting all this time. Why buy land if you weren't going to settle? Zachary shrugged, a hint of embarrassment in his expression. Everyone needs something to work toward, I suppose. A dream to keep them going through the hard times. Understanding dawned. This is your dream. A ranch of your own. He nodded, his eyes on the distant horizon. I never had enough money saved to stock it properly. And truth be told, I wasn't sure I wanted to work it alone. He turned to face her fully. But lately, I've been thinking it might be time to start building. Gabriella's heart quickened at the implication. Building. A house, to start with. His voice was casual, but his eyes were intent on her face. Nothing fancy at first. Just a cabin. 2 rooms, maybe 3. A porch facing west to watch the sunset. The image he painted was so vivid, she could almost see it, a small house nestled against the hillside, smoke curling from a stone chimney, horses in a corral nearby. It sounds wonderful, she said softly. It could be. Zachary took both her hands in his expression earnest. Gabriella, I know you said you weren't ready for permanent decisions. I respect that. But I want you to know that when you are ready, if you ever are, this is what I'm offering. Not just my heart, but a home. A place that could be ours. Tears pricked at her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that this was what she wanted, this land, this life, this man who had asked if she wanted food or a friend and had ended up giving her so much more. Zachary, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I think the distant sound of hoofbeats interrupted her, growing louder by the second. Zachary was on his feet instantly, his hand going to the revolver at his hip as 3 riders crested the ridge. Gabriella's blood ran cold as she recognized them, Blackwood's men, with the bearded one in the lead. Well, well, the man called, pulling his horse to a stop a few yards away. Looks like our search is finally over. Miss Winters, Mr. Blackwood sends his regards. Zachary stepped in front of Gabriella, his stance protective. The lady isn't going anywhere with you. The bearded man laughed. That's not for you to decide, Cowboy. We have a warrant for her arrest, theft of property worth over $500. Those charges are false, and you know it, Gabriella said, finding her voice despite her fear. Doesn't matter what we know. The man patted his saddlebag. Got the papers right here, signed by a judge. Now you can come quiet like, or we can do this the hard way. Zachary's voice was steel. There's no way she's going back to Blackwood. Not today, not ever. The 3 men exchanged glances, and Gabriella saw their hands drift toward their weapons. Time seemed to slow as she realized what was about to happen. These men intended to kill Zachary if necessary to take her back. No, she cried, stepping forward. I'll go with you. Just don't hurt him. Zachary turned to her, disbelief and pain in his eyes. Gabriella, no. You can't. I won't have your blood on my hands. She touched his face gently, memorizing the feel of his skin beneath her fingertips. Please, Zachary, let me go. The bearded man smirked. Smart decision, miss. Now come on over here, nice and easy. Before she could move, the sound of more hoofbeats filled the air. Over the ridge came a group of riders, the Circle M's foreman and 4 ranch hands, all armed, with Martha bringing up the rear on her sturdy gelding. Figured you 2 might need some company when we spotted these fellows heading your way, the foreman called, his rifle resting casually across his saddle. The odds now decidedly against them. Blackwood's men shifted uneasily. The bearded one attempted bravado. This doesn't concern you folks. We're here on official business. The only official business in this county goes through Sheriff Taylor, Martha interrupted, pulling up alongside Zachary. And I happen to know he never issued any warrant for Miss Winters. We got papers from Judge Davis in. Judge Davis has been dead for 2 years, the foreman cut in. Try again. Caught in their lie, the 3 men exchanged glances, clearly calculating their chances. With 6 armed ranch hands facing them, those chances looked increasingly slim. Mr. Blackwood won't be pleased, the bearded man said, his bluster fading. Mr. Blackwood isn't here, Zachary replied evenly. And I suggest you tell him that if he sends anyone else after Miss Winters, they won't be returning to report back. For a tense moment, It seemed the confrontation might still turn violent. Then the bearded man spat into the dirt and jerked his head at his companions. "This isn't over," he warned as they turned their horses. "Yes," Gabriella said clearly, finding a strength she hadn't known she possessed. "It is." They watched as the three men rode away, not speaking until they had disappeared from view. Only then did Gabriella allow her knees to buckle, the delayed reaction to the danger setting in. Zachary caught her, holding her close as she trembled. "It's all right," he murmured against her hair. "You're safe. We're all safe." Martha dismounted, coming to place a hand on Gabriella's shoulder. "Those cowards won't be back," she said confidently. "Men like that only have power when they think they're facing someone weaker." The foreman nodded in agreement. "Besides, I sent Jimmy to fetch Sheriff Taylor. He'll want to hear about men flashing false warrants in his county." As the immediate danger passed, the ranch hands discreetly withdrew, leaving Zachary and Gabriella alone on the ridge once more. The sun was beginning to set, painting the valley below in shades of gold and amber. "I thought I was going to lose you," Zachary said quietly, his arms still around her. "When you stepped forward, Gabriella silenced him with a finger to his lips. "I couldn't bear the thought of them hurting you because of me. And I couldn't bear the thought of you back with Blackwood." His blue eyes searched hers. "I love you, Gabriella. I think I have since I first saw you hiding behind that trading post." The words she had longed to hear filled her heart with joy. "I love you too, Zachary. And I don't want to wait anymore. I'm ready for that permanent decision." His face lit with hope. "You mean, yes. Yes to a home in this valley. Yes to a life with you. Yes to everything you're offering." She smiled through happy tears. "I've been running for so long. It's time to stop and build something that will last." Zachary's answering smile was radiant as he drew her into a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, a future that had begun with a simple question behind a trading post. 1 year later, Gabriella stood on the porch of their newly completed house, watching as Zachary worked with a young colt in the corral nearby. The autumn sun gilded everything in soft golden light, from the small herd of cattle grazing in the valley to the vegetable garden she had planted beside the house. So much had changed in 12 months. Sheriff Taylor had sent word to the territorial governor about Blackwood's false warrants and intimidation tactics, resulting in an investigation that had uncovered numerous illegal activities. The last they had heard, Blackwood was facing prison time, his empire crumbling around him. More importantly, Gabriella and Zachary had been married in a simple ceremony at the Circle M, with Martha and the Hollistos standing witness. They had worked side by side to build their home and establish their small ranch, which they had named New Horizon. Gabriella smiled as Zachary released the colt back to its mother and walked toward the house, his face lighting up as it always did when he saw her. Some days, she could hardly believe how completely her life had transformed from a frightened woman hiding behind a trading post to a confident rancher's wife with a home and a future of her own choosing. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked as he climbed the porch steps, placing a gentle hand on her growing belly. Their first child was due in the spring. "About beginnings," she replied, covering his hand with her own. "And how the worst day of my life led me to the best." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I thank God every day that I decided to check behind that trading post." Gabriella laughed softly. "And I thank God that when you asked if I wanted food or a friend, you ended up giving me both and so much more." As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Gabriella leaned into her husband's embrace, filled with gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. What had begun as an act of kindness from a stranger had blossomed into a love that would sustain them through all the seasons of their lives together. And as darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the vast desert sky, Zachary and Gabriella Reid entered their home hand in hand, no longer running, no longer searching, but finally, completely home.